Welcome to Season 2 of Malevolent Autopsy. I'm your host, Queen. I use she, her pronouns, and before we go any further than that, let me warn you, this show contains major spoilers for everything in Malevolent as of the date this episode is published. We're going to dissect the patron votes that drive the story week to week, so grab your scalpel and let's begin the autopsy. I am here tonight with the wonderful and illustrious Vol Control. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell me what part of Arthur's body you control this evening?
Howdy, hello. I'm Vol Control. I use he, him pronouns, and tonight I am controlling Arthur Lester's larynx.
Ooh.
Is that how you pronounce that?
I think so.
The voice box.
Sounds right to me.
Because Arthur has given us some real inspiring words.
Yes, I agree. We're going to talk about some of those, but before we do, would you like to give us our chapter summary, pretty please?
Of course. This was chapter 255, and in it, Arthur Lester learns the lesson Aaliyah had been trying to teach him all along. When all is lost, hold out hope. Carry the fire, even if it will go out. Fight to exist, if only for the purpose of... fuck you.
I love that. Very concise.
I kept it really short, this summary really short, because I figure that we're going to talk in depth about a lot of this episode, so I don't need to front load with all the information.
Right. And for those of you listening in the future, this was part 51, The Purpose, with its final chapter posted to patrons on February 28th of 2025. And as of recording this on March 8th, 2025, we're still living in frightening, frustrating, and difficult times, especially for marginalized communities. So tonight we'll be taking our time to listen to all of the voice recordings submitted in their entirety, as the themes and messages in this episode resonated deeply with Malevolent's current audience. With that being said, Vol, would you like to start us off with anything? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak for myself as a transgender American and speak for a lot of the Malevolent fandom, which I know is rife with transgender people and with queer people, and I know that Malevolent has provided us with a lot of messages of hope in really poignant times, and this was one of those episodes that all of us were just sort of like jaw on the floor, just staring into the middle distance, because it was this message of hope that we really needed to hear right now, and that felt really personal and really meaningful, and gave us some fighting words to carry with us, to carry the fire forward, and to just keep going no matter how dire or bleak it looks right now. So yeah, it was a really important episode, and I don't cry easily anymore, and it's definitely made me emotional and tear up a couple of times today.
Yeah, and the only thing I want to add is this episode in particular it's not unique for the community to be hit hard by a deep and resonant theme in an episode, especially because this show has been going on for quite a few years now. And I think that for me this morning, I did something that I had not done yet. And, I called some of my representatives and tried to do what I could do in that moment, which is something that I've been wanting to do, but really struggled with mentally, emotionally wrapping my brain around, and it felt really, really good. And I'm going to credit the momentum that I got from this episode and what it taught me and how it reinforced a message that I already knew, but really hadn't internalized and applied to my own life and the circumstances surrounding everything. I am also queer. I am asexual, and I am very. I also struggle very much with dealing with current events, and even staying informed is a big struggle for me. So the fact that I not only woke up and chose to be informed, but also found the strength to actually take action, it's very much something that Malevolent and its message inspired me to do. I just hope that anybody who is listening to this in the future you find some strength to do what you can do, even if that's just carrying on for another day, because it doesn't have to be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Every little bit counts, and I also am in somewhat of a leadership position in my local queer community. I'm the co-admin of a little local support group that is overwhelmingly trans, and after listening to this episode earlier, I was like, oh man, I can't wait for this episode to go public because there's so many quotes that I want to share, even with people who don't listen to Malevolent. Like, in the face of my impending demise, I will still fight to exist. Like, those are the kind of words that we've been sharing with each other even before Harlan put it so poetically, It's amazing that Harlan, arguably a straight cis guy, can really resonate with the queer struggle and the like marginalized struggle. I'm in awe of his empathy.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as somebody who is, I choose to define myself as like panromantic, asexual, and who is very much on the side of part of, I'm biracial. There's part of these many marginalized communities. We have so many different kinds in the fandom that I interact with every day, and things are impacting us in different ways all the time. But something that we are really good at is uplifting and supporting each other and being a community. And I think that we have a lot of great leaders and supporters and creatives in here that are really contributing to a great overall message. So I think Malevolent is definitely the space to bring people together around hope, and the fact that that's the message that's resonating with everybody so hard is definitely reflective of what kind of people listen to Malevolent. So I'm very proud right now to be a fan of such a lovely show.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we hear from some of our audience?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and play a few voice messages. We're going to do something a little bit different this evening. We're going to play a message and talk about it, and then maybe play a few more, do some talking points, and kind of break things up a little bit because we have a record-breaking number of voice submissions this evening. So lots of messages, which I really encouraged, and I wanted to hear people's thoughts because this was a no-vote week. So there's a little bit less to talk about as far as what we usually spend a lot of time on. And this chapter was 17 minutes and 58 seconds long.
And full of so many beautiful lines that we could literally spend the whole episode just like rereading the last like 5 minutes of it.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a lot to go through, but let's go ahead and start with Faye.
I'm Faye, she, they. I connected to part 255 in this very specific way as someone who attempts to be creative sometimes, because it's like, why am I writing words on this document when I don't know if it'll go anywhere, or when I don't feel like it'll ever be as good on the page as I want it to be? Why light a fire that is sure to die? And the answer is that the process of creating is still important, even if it doesn't quote unquote go anywhere, because sometimes I'll get even 2 good sentences out of it, and that will be pretty great. And also because being in a creative mindset is good for me. I think it's something I need, and I will still fight for that part of me to continue to exist, even when some of the messages I've internalized tell me it shouldn't.
Thank you, Faye. That was beautiful.
Yeah, I loved hearing your connection with creativity and how it can feel hopeless sometimes, or feel like, what's the point? Who cares? And I'm totally there with you about how creativity is like good for my brain. And honestly, I'm at a point where I don't think I could live without being creative, without writing something, without putting something out into the world, or at least down on the page. And, it doesn't have to be this like big, grand, sweeping, perfect piece of art that has a clear message and says something important. Honestly, like right now, I feel like any and all queer art, especially the quiet, small moments, are so important to put out into the world.
I totally agree. And as a person who really likes to write, I am my own worst enemy when it comes to what's the point. Vol can personally attest to the fact that I have sprawling ideas and huge thoughts, and I could probably talk for hours and have talked for hours at him about all these ideas about things that would be fun to write or things I can envision in my brain. And then I just don't do anything about them because what's the point? And I not only depression, but also lots of other reasons, primarily things like ADHD, where that self-motivation can really be hard to come by. And I am such a person who I have trouble understanding what the point of doing anything is if I can't share it with other people. And I'm really bad at personally like, well, nobody has to see it if you write it and you don't like it. But then I just get frustrated because I, quote unquote, wasted my time because I can't share it with everybody because I don't like it. So this big cycle goes around and then I end up just not doing anything. But that is so not the point. that is not the purpose.
The struggle is real.
Yeah.
The struggle is real, but I think that honestly, like, the best way to get past that, like, need to perfect something is to just keep making art and keep putting it out there and just, ripping the Band-Aid off. And I promise it hurts less and less the more you do it. But it's hard to push yourself to do it when it's not as good as you want it to be. Like Faye was saying, like, sometimes it's hard to start writing something or start making a piece of art if you don't like the outcome or you don't feel like it'll live up to the image that you have in your head. But even if you do a bunch of crap, you still might get those two really brilliant sentences out of it. And I think that is worth it.
And it's something that I have been gradually learning with Autopsy itself because I have a huge fear of failure, and to me, failure is anything less than my personal perfect, and I just won't do things. I will work them up so hard in my head that it could never possibly live up to what I've imagined it. And Autopsy is the absolute antithesis to anything I've ever done before, where in the very beginning, I was just recording whatever for an hour and putting it up, and if somebody listened, that would be cool. And it was very unstructured, which is good. Like, my point was not to make something good, but to make something every week and to publish it. And that was really, really, really hard to do because I could see all of the problems and ways I could make it better. But I didn't have time, didn't have motivation, didn't have energy, wasn't sure what I was doing at all. So I had to gradually work up to where I'm at now. And getting help was really nice. And it was a really good lesson in, had I never just published anything, nothing would have ever happened. So, it's better to do something than to do nothing, even if it's not perfect. So I love that sentiment.
Yeah. And look at you now. We're at Autopsy 40.
Yes.
Episode 40. That's crazy.
Episode 40. Gosh, that's like almost a year. That's 10 months of Autopsy.
Incredible.
Okay, shall we move to our next message?
Yeah, let's do.
So we are going to hear from Maya next.
Hi there. My name is Maya, and my pronouns are she, her. I wanted to bring up a question in response to the childish gods discussion that happened last episode, because I think it really highlights Harlan's excellent character writing. So, on the high level here, if humans mature into adults according to what our societies expect, whether they're set through collectivism, religion, general morality, etc., doesn't it make sense that the gods, who don't really have a society, not seem mature to us? I think it's difficult to imagine that gods would act as a grown human would when their entire existence differs from ours, so we compare them to those who haven't grown up yet. Despite seeming to have familial structures that are similar to ours, with Azathoth being the father to all, Mother Darkness and her children, Nyarlathotep being Lilith's dad, we don't see the same kind of cycle in moral maturity. And I think this distinction is beautifully highlighted in the relationship between John and Arthur. I believe it was Misraa who mentioned their conversation during the farm episode where they discussed John's immaturity and how Arthur is expecting him to act like a human adult would. John has never had to bend to morality in order to be trusted or liked or accepted until Arthur. It goes to show just how powerful their relationship can be and how far John has come since being the King in Yellow. It just is such a poignant detail that I hadn't really noticed until that discussion surrounding Lilith's immaturity. And I really can't wait to see if Harlan explores this at all or further in coming episodes.
I love that. Thank you so much, Maya.
Yeah, I thought this was such an interesting question, and I wanted to circle back to it. And we do get some more of Lilith's like childish behavior in this episode. I mean, most prominently, I'm thinking about her like stamping out the fire, just like a little brat. I thought that was very funny. But also, I've been rotating the beginning of this episode around in my head, and I still haven't like fully formed ideas about what the implications of what Arthur says are, where he like talks about he says, I believe the part of you that's truthful is the part of you that cares, and I cannot understand why. And he's talking about how she was a forgotten one and how she might be different because she had spent that time fragmented and her only like connection was not to her whole self as Lilith, but to Arthur. There's a lot of interesting things going on there.
Yeah, I wrote that down actually as a quote that I didn't fully understand. I believe the part of you that's truthful is the part that cares, and I cannot understand why. What did you take away from that?
I don't know. No, give me a moment. I'll organize my thoughts. I think he was talking about how Lilith supposedly says that she thinks humans are insignificant, but at the same time calls Arthur her favorite. And Arthur pointed out that he asked her, like, do you really, like, despise humans, or do you despise the person who indoctrinated you, aka her father, into those beliefs about humans? And so I think that Arthur is trying to get at the fact that he thinks that Lilith cares more about humans and the human world. And I think that the, like, sort of end goal for that line of discussion is to point out that she doesn't actually want to end the world.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if my interpretation was accurate, but I wanted to assume that it was talking about Arthur's confusion as to why she cares. And
right.
I wonder how that plays into why Arthur is quote unquote special and why all of these gods are singling out this one
want
dude.
His number.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I was gonna say I find it interesting that wasn't it the witch who asked John about why the King in Yellow even like tried to enter this world, and like sort of implied that there was already a curiosity there.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder, you know, there might be some similarities with what happened with Lilith, and I find it interesting that this sort of implies that when these fragmentations happen, it seems like, or at least under the right circumstances, it seems like the fragments, having lost their full sort of like god status, start to get curious about humanity more so than, because they are like beneath regard when they are in their full power, but there's this curiosity, and I wonder if under the right circumstances Scratch or Lilith could find sympathy or empathy for humans the way that John has. I mean, I certainly don't foresee it happening quickly, but you know, when we're talking about how these gods are childlike when they start to interact with humans kind of on a one-to-one level, it's just interesting how malleable they potentially could be.
You know what? And that reminds me, in combination with something I just read in the chat, which I will read now. Autumn says, I feel like this is possibly Arthur trying to fix the mistake he made with Yellow. He sees a tiny spark of something in Lilith as Scratch, and instead of ignoring it because they're a malevolent god like he did with Yellow, he actually tries to pull it out of her and bring it to everyone's attention. And that makes me remember the line, you don't have to be a human to be a person, Yellow. And that moment of recognition in that, like, these gods may have some kind of lingering curiosity or understanding about humans after interacting with them or looking at them for long enough that they start to develop a deeper understanding or a deeper feeling or something more complicated than the, like you put it, than just seeing them as like beneath regard. And I wonder if Cain is the wildly opposite side of that, where you have, like, he recognizes that they're more complicated than gods give them credit for, but he's, instead of appreciating that about them and seeing them as like individuals with purpose and agency and all of that, he's kind of rocketed to the other side, and now they're science experiments. And he doesn't care for them. He just realizes there's something there. Whereas other gods don't really even go to that level. They don't care at all. So I think Lilith is the other, maybe Arthur is pointing out that there is a part of Lilith that goes to that other side of, that this is not necessarily wrong on her scale, but maybe that there's something more complex than she's willing to examine because of the way that she's been, like he said, indoctrinated.
Yeah. It's not just beneath regard. She's flirting with the idea that maybe she wants to, like, gently hold a human.
I like that.
Yeah, it is really interesting how, Cain has carved out this different identity than he had as Nyarlathotep. And I am curious how his sort of, like, branching path, in the same way that, Scratch developed away from Lilith and John developed away from the King in Yellow, and Cain is such an outlier when it comes to having formed a unique identity,
Right. And I wonder if it's also a case of being so closely connected to the one person who's different. How does that ripple effect down? How does Cain change everybody connected to Cain? How does that moment impact everybody in his downline, is what I was gonna say. In his multi-level marketing scheme of gods.
Yes. I mean, if anyone was gonna pull that shit, it would definitely be Cain.
Yeah, and I also think that there's another interesting point that I wrote down. You are a forgotten one, stripped bare of your personality and character. And then they go on to talk about her connection to Arthur. Like, what the fuck was going on with all that?
Yeah. Graham says something interesting which made my brain light up. He says, maybe because Cain's identity was specifically solidified through becoming aware of the potential of his own death. Oh, he had an existential crisis over the concept of his own mortality. Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's very interesting.
And Fish wants to point out the whole concept of Lilith not respecting that identity shift from Nyarlathotep to Cain. I want to just point out really quickly, briefly, there's a couple of different perspectives on this. I think both are super interesting in their own ways. I don't lend more credence to one over the other. I've seen where Fish was saying, like, it's a concept of respect, and that she, either it's because she doesn't appreciate that change and she still sees him as the intentions are pretty much the same, or the result might be the same, or something like that, versus the concept of, maybe she sees it as more of a, you killed what I knew as Nyarlathotep, like almost sort of a metaphorical murder. Because for Cain, it's a reformation of his identity to distinguish himself as unique. But to Lilith, it might be much more personal than that for her, because that is not the person that she formed an attachment to. That for her, it's just too different. I've also seen some people theorizing that maybe this Lilith isn't the original timeline's Lilith, and all kinds of other more complicated stuff that I am not educated enough to know about. So I think all of those.
We may have to ask the lore wizards as we sort of unfold more of what's going on with the hierarchy of gods.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I think we want to do another voice memo.
Let's do it.
Okay, we are going to hear from Seer of Time.
Hello all, Seer of Time here, she, her. I've decided to be extraordinarily predictable and talk about poetry, and specifically the theme of perseverance. To provide very brief context, I'm someone who is happily religious, which, as anyone can no doubt see, is very much in opposition to our dear Arthur. However, something that is integral to what I believe is this idea of enduring, not as a passive tolerance of the difficulties of life, but an active daily commitment and a trust that there is always good to come. During Arthur's incredibly moving speech at the end of the chapter, he says, quote, "It is the purpose of our journey, not the destination, but to impart upon me the importance of having the will which says to me, hold on." Close quote. This line immediately arrested my attention because it makes reference to one of my favorite poems of all time, If by Rudyard Kipling. I wanted to share the section of the poem Arthur was pulling from. Quote, "If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on." Close quote. I can think of few other poems that so perfectly encapsulate this theme of endurance, perseverance, and hope. It doesn't matter what your life might look like or how downhearted, tired, and broken you might feel at this moment. That does not define you. What matters most is not staying on your feet, but instead having the fire within you to stand up again, the will which says to you, hold on.
Thank you, Seer. That was absolutely beautiful.
So lovely. And I'm so glad that you pointed out that line from the poem If. It is such a lovely poem, and I remember like months ago, Harlan made a point to mention that like it's one of his favorite poems, and I don't think that it was quoted in like season 4 or anything, or any time before that. I think this is the first time he's slipped in some lines from If is in this part, and I want to say that there was also a reference to this poem in 253, I think. But in any case, it's such a lovely poem and such a lovely sentiment.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think I've heard it in passing throughout my life in snippets, but never enough to recognize it before, because this feels like something, this sounds so freaking corny. This feels like something I've always heard, like something I've always known. It's very familiar to me in a very deep way, but I don't have any memory of ever hearing it before. It's kind of crazy. But I will say it's a beautiful poem, and I love the ample use of poetry in Malevolent. I've never thought of myself as enjoying poetry because it has always felt a little bit out of reach and intimidating and a little bit too intellectual for me. I've always been of the sway that poetry is for smart people, and I'm not a smart person, which is very sad because I think that's how a lot of people feel when they're growing up and they're reading Shakespeare, or they're reading Emily Dickinson, or they're reading poetry in class in traditional American academic classrooms, where they're taught that poetry is a highbrow thing, that you have to be really clever and really smart and super knowledgeable to do.
You have to be able to appreciate the art and use critical analysis to read the intention and meaning of the words.
Right, and it's not. It's not for sure.
No.
And I love that.
It's definitely...
It's brought back into reach for a lot of people who are getting into Malevolent as a fandom, and they can go look up these lovely poems where things originate, and they always fit in beautifully to the story.
Yeah, they do. They really do. And it's something that I've always enjoyed doing in my writing as well, is like, you know, when I'm doing my research on whatever, and I find, you know, these beautiful lines of poetry that are applicable, or, you know, I get inspired by looking at, you know, something another author has mentioned, and I always love slipping those references in, because, you know, the people who get it will really appreciate it, and the people who are curious will go and seek it out. But also, you mentioned Shakespeare, and we were just talking about this in the server the other day, that some people felt like they didn't appreciate Shakespeare, or they didn't even like Shakespeare until much later in life, because reading it on the page was kind of a slog, and it is. I can't agree. But when you see it performed, when you see it come to life, you see it as it was intended to be appreciated and enjoyed, and especially in a like communal experience, and you realize like, oh no, this is art for the people. This is not supposed to be from an ivory tower, you know, saved for only the wealthiest people. This is like literally like the body humor, the, you know, the sort of like over the top drama. It's meant to be for the people, and it's so sad to me that it has been kind of elevated beyond its intention.
Yeah, I do remember that back in school, high school specifically, I was able to, this is not a brag. This is just, to me, this is not like a overtly good thing. It's just a thing. I was able to read Shakespeare and understand it without a translation, and that made me a person to go to for homework. It was a lot of like, hey, can you tell me what this says? And so I would do a lot of quote unquote translating Shakespeare, and people called me smart for that. But just because I was able to read and understand Shakespeare didn't mean I like was really, really into it. And I also I didn't enjoy the way it was written. Just because I could read it didn't mean that I thought it was good. I just thought it just made sense to me. So all of that being said, I was able to read Shakespeare without any issues. I understood what was being conveyed, and I still felt like poetry was just not for me, and it was out of my grasp because I wasn't elevated enough to get it, and I didn't understand why it was so meaningful. So all of that being said, I also want to mention that poetry and music and art in the way that it is in Malevolent is so important to me, because something that has always resonated with me is that humans are storytellers. We are one of the very few things that separates us from a lot of other living animals is our ability to share and tell stories and build communities in this specific way. And as a human who loves to tell stories, which I think we kind of all do in our own specific way, whether that's painting or writing or drawing or gossiping, I think that art and Malevolent going hand in hand and being such a tie to humanity is so important and so special, because art is something that we uniquely make. It does not serve any basic human purpose. It is not something that we need to do for nutritional value. It's not something our bodies need. It is something uniquely that we do because we can and because we like it, and it is good for our brains. So I love that all of these different types of art are really emphasized in Malevolent.
Yeah, and it feels like it just reinforces the message that Malevolent, that's woven throughout it. I wanted to read something from the chat. Waterfall said, I feel like hearing Invictus recited in the show was the first time I got a poem. And this may surprise you, Queen, but poetry's pretty opaque to me too. Like I have to, when I read poetry, I have to like rewire my brain to read the words differently and like actually process it. I don't know what it is about poetry, but it takes a lot of mental effort for me to read poetry. And yeah, I think that having the connection between hearing the lines spoken in the show and spoken in context, kind of like with the Shakespeare thing, where Shakespeare makes more sense if you hear it. It allows you to contextualize it better. But yeah, hearing Invictus, hearing it read for the purpose that it was read for, it made me understand that poem so deeply. And now when I go back and I read it myself with my own eyes, every line jumps off of the page or the screen for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember reading in the Eel Pit on the Invictus server when people were talking about poetry and Shakespeare specifically. Somebody, I wish I had written down that comment, but I didn't know it was going to be relevant. Somebody said Shakespeare was writing for performance. It was never meant to be sat down and read through. And that totally flipped my understanding of art on its side, because I was like, oh yeah, the intention of how this artwork was supposed to be ingested versus how we're doing it now. Like, there's nothing wrong with reading Shakespeare, and somebody has to read it. The actors who portray the characters have to read it. But the way it was meant to be ingested does change how effective it can be at conveying the message. And that is something that you can see reflected in Malevolent because of the way it's structured in the public versus the patron experience. And I was really hit me like how different it's going to be for everybody who doesn't get to live through these real-time chapter drops.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Seer. That was a lovely comment on the beautiful line. This episode had like everything. It had poetry, it had a Shakespeare, reference, it had an uplifting message of hope.
Yeah.
Everything.
Before we jump into all of the beautiful stuff that Arthur says toward the end and all of that, I want to hang out in the flashback for a second because there were a couple of things that I thought were interesting. John specifically comes up with the idea that they should just take the chest and leave. And I want to say, John, honey, what is your plan? What do you think? Where do you think you're going to go with the chest? Where do you think Antoine's going to go? Also, like, I don't think you're in any danger of Antoine killing you at this point, my dude. He's pretty much dying on his knees right now. And you're like, maybe we should just steal the chest. At this point, you could probably take it in front of his eyes, and I don't know if he could do much about it.
Right.
And I also want to know, like, what he thought they were gonna do with, like, okay, take it and do what? Use it? Like, what?
Yeah, what's the plan? And I think the thing is that, like, their plan right now is hope for some secret third thing. I feel like that's the plan right now.
John's like, I don't have to think of the plan C. That's not my problem.
Yeah, not my job. But also, during the flashback, I love the argument that Arthur and John have. There's just some really incredible lines there where Arthur is talking about he doesn't need a voice of reason. He needs somewhere to fucking scream. And I love that, but also I couldn't help but think in the back of my head listening to it again, Antoine's just fucking sitting there listening to this guy argue with himself.
So, as beautiful as this episode is, I need somebody to visualize, like, put it in art somehow. Antoine just fucking standing there for all of this, looking dead-ass, hungover, exhausted, muddy, and gross, and just, like, wet. Just standing there watching Arthur freak the fuck out. Like, I even wrote down, Arthur is barking at John to read the map over and over again, and it's fucking blank, and Antoine knows that. And before the recording started, we were saying, the map is fucking as blank as the letter from Oscar, and John's being asked to read it. And this whole thing's going on. It's this dramatic mic drop moment. By the way, I'm so happy that I was right about the map being blank, because I did say that, and I'm so vindicated. And Antoine's if he wasn't terrified of Arthur at that point, I don't know what else it would take.
Right, yeah. And I mean, I'm certain that Antoine has heard Arthur talk to the voice in his head more than once in the 2 weeks that they've been together, but never has it been quite as blatant as this argument, like directly in front of him. Yeah, definitely. Also, I just want to say, in regards to me being super correct about the map, this is proof that I was right about this thing, and so therefore I will be right about Charlie coming back. You see, yes. It's a streak, right? So I'm right about this. I'll probably be right about the next several things, which means I will also be right about Charlie coming back. And I don't think it's that implausible. Arthur is telling me straight up, Queen, hold out hope. He's coming. Hold the fire for Charlie. Hold it. And I will be the only one, if I must be, carrying that torch into this dark, dark night. I will. He is coming back. Yes. No, that is precisely what you being right about the blank map means. It means that Charlie's going to come back.
Yes, yes. And I just want to say really quick, I do sell Charlie Dowd is Alive t-shirts at bonfire.com. So if you want to join in my What Would Charlie Dowd Do crusade and keep hope with me and keep that fire alive, all of the proceeds do go to charity. Anyway.
I love that.
So briefly gonna just say that I loved Antoine being super at peace and so genuine once Arthur understood everything. And it really made me go like, oh, thank God, Sweetie has fulfilled his purpose and can lie down and die now. And like, I say thank God, not because I don't like him. He's wonderful. It's because I don't want him to be suffering anymore. And also I didn't want him to be...
You want Arthur to stop fucking yelling at him. He's like...
What do I have to do to get you to stop yelling at me? Lay down and die? Like, because I will. That's how I feel when people yell at me.
Yeah, I was listening to an earlier Autopsy episode, and it was the one where we decided to trust Antoine for the first time when we first met him. And I was looking back, and in that episode, I had said, can you imagine, after we got the Antoine voice reveal, can you imagine if we had been mean to him? Like him? This little, like, sad puppy? Like, it would have been like kicking a puppy.
Yes, and I love that Antoine's whole kind of back and forth with Arthur, although it was short, it very much reminded me of, you know, when he's like, is my life meaningless? It was just such a symbol of like, everybody in this narrative has had a purpose. And just because their purpose goes off screen doesn't mean that they didn't mean anything. They were just a plot device. That, like, Oscar is probably fine. I'm sure he's living a one-armed life, whatever that's like. And he's probably doing stuff that priests, he's probably still, he can ladle with one arm.
Yeah.
And who else has he? Daniel's still alive. I'm trying now to count how many people Arthur has left alive.
Yeah, right. How many people left in the wake of Arthur Lester who aren't dead or missing?
Yeah, Marie is still alive. Charlie's still alive.
Hattie's...
Charlie is still alive.
We're putting that in the maybe column.
Charlie is still alive, and you don't get to be on this show unless you agree with me. I'm
per
kidding.
My contract.
Yeah, so, I mean, the point I wanted to make was really that just, you know, I liked that Antoine pointed out, hey, just because I'm out of the narrative doesn't mean that I didn't serve a purpose and that it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Which I appreciated.
I really loved that he even brought up that, you know, he had asked Arthur if he thought that there was an afterlife, a heaven or something. And Arthur had answered honestly no. And Antoine said that he didn't either. And he says, if there's nothing after this life, does that make my life meaningless? And I think that comment really, like, brought to the forefront that, yes, it technically could be seen as meaningless, but that's why you have to embrace meaning in your existence.
Yeah, you have to make it mean something. I also really liked when Arthur looked straight at me and said, I have no ace up my sleeve, no trick or plan to implement. I have no secret I kept hidden, knowledge I reserved, no bullets in my gun. Like, that was directly @ Queen. No, I didn't have a trap planned. I didn't make a fun, catchy phrase for the butcher to come in and shoot things. I didn't have a gun to kill a giant not goat with. I'm still so mad it's not actually a goat. I feel like that was the point where when I first listened to it, I wanted to stand up and be like, and that's the point. Like, he doesn't have a plan to get out of this. And that is the whole reason that this had to happen this way, because sometimes there just isn't. There isn't a plan. There isn't a trick. There isn't something that's going to wake you up. It's happening, and you still have to keep going. And that's the hardest part of the journey, but it is the part that makes me feel like the end is worth it. So I love that moment of Arthur directly telling us that he doesn't have anything secret going on. And in a way, it felt very much like Harlan going, no, guys, don't speculate. This is not a GM trick. This is really me saying there is no plan to get out of this. Now, do I think that it's going to end, Malevolent's going to end in disaster? No, but I do think that for this moment in the story, there really isn't a plan.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is fascinating. I'm on the edge of my seat wondering what's going to happen next, and I've been saying that, I think, all season. This season 5 specifically.
Yeah. Are we ready to hear another voice note?
Let's do it.
Okay, I think up next is Rose's message.
Hi, Autopsy. Roses of Envy, she, her, and I'm sure no one's surprised, but I'm going to talk about some of the music and soundscaping utilized in this part. Queen has given me free rein to yap, so y'all better buckle in. To start, I love the unique horror stings throughout Part 51, but particularly in this chapter as we interacted with Lilith. A horror sting is a sound effect that is meant to startle and unnerve. Typically, it's a string glissando, but in this episode, with more imminent moments, we have harsh sounds of metal crashing and high-pitched string screeches that do an amazing job of creating tension. In this part, there are a few piano tracks that aren't on Harlan's Bandcamp, but they're very familiar. The one playing in the scene with Arthur discussing Lilith, I believe, was also used in Season 4 with Scratch, but I'll have to fact-check that at a later time. As Arthur confronts Lilith about the Blackstone's true purpose, questioning if it's going to be used to quote-unquote end everything, Thoreau's Goodbye begins to play. We don't hear the full soundtrack, which is something of a trend for soundtracks this season. However, the way this one is paused in transition, the hiss of the fire being smothered by the rain, and the soundtrack fading feels incredibly significant. Now, this is more of a quote, but you're not offering any solutions, you're just stating the obvious. I don't need a voice of reason, I need somewhere to scream at the top of my lungs if they hadn't hurt so fucking much. Listen, Arthur, being able to scream in your car is a freeing experience, nothing more cathartic than being able to shut and lock some doors, blast music, and let loose. But in all seriousness, Arthur's frustration is so palpable in his frantic tone of voice, in the metallic stings, and the constant downpour of rain and pointed rumbles of thunder. When it all fades to just rain, Antoine saying nowhere, softly, it really feels like a painful revelation. We were never going to reach our destination, and there's no place that will ever be safe. As I've discussed before, the silence is just as important as the music. Soundscaping adds an incredible amount, and in this episode it's felt so clearly when the rain increases, when the thunder rumbles or crashes, and when their voices are the only thing to break the environment. Every moment in this episode has hit a beat that twists the knife deeper. It was not meaningless, it was hope, said by Antoine, is immediately joined by the melodic line of Thoreau's song. There's no bass line to this, there's no stability, there is only the harsh realization that all they can do is continue on until they can't anymore. The song resolves with Antoine lying down, leaving us in the rain alone, and Arthur saying we learned the lesson and start a fire. Immediately upon returning to the present after the flashback, we have the entirety of Thoreau's song. It gives us the impression of the full picture. We understand as much as Arthur does what message Alia has given Arthur, which he's well and truly taken to heart. We have the full version with cello, showing John's resolve with Arthur's message, as he insists to Lilith the fire is not for comfort. It is a reminder that he will still fight to exist. The rain patters to a stop, John remarking on the break in the clouds, to which we are greeted with Noel's theme, a breath of fresh air to give us real hope, and for a moment it feels like everything will be okay until it's cut off by Lilith's tantrum and stomping out the fire. Its brevity didn't lessen its existence. Sometimes the things that were in our life for far too little time make the biggest impacts. I'm sure we all had different thoughts of characters that relate to that statement, but with that statement brought Thoreau's lullaby, and John's request to look up at the stars. As John gives Arthur a description, we have the cello accompaniment, which gives us hope for only a brief second. Couldn't see the forest for the trees indeed.
Thank you so much, Rose. I really, really appreciate your time and energy dissecting those things for us. We are definitely going to have Rose back on to do a deeper dive into music at the end of season 5. And I want to first say thank you so much for bringing up Noel's theme, because he was here for far too little time, but he made such a big impact, and we need him back for more. And
Rose knew that you wouldn't let her yap for that long if she didn't mention Charlie.
That's the rule. If you relate your message to Charlie, you can have as much time as you want. The second thing I want to say is it did not hit me how much the sound of this episode contributed to the emotional impact that it had on me. And
yes,
until I really listened again hearing the music as music rather than just background for what I was processing. I didn't used to get goosebumps, but now I get goosebumps every time that cello swells in, and every time Arthur talks during the entirety of Faro's song, because those are just two moments where the music really doesn't just enhance what you're hearing, but it emphasizes it in a very deliberate way. It was just a beautiful moment for the music of Malevolent for this part.
Yeah, it's almost like, I guess, yeah, obviously it's part of the set dressing, but it almost takes on this like greater level of importance, almost like another character in the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, Rose. It was absolutely beautiful.
I was so excited that you mentioned the silences and the rain sounds, Rose, because I wrote that in my notes and I wanted to talk about it because I love how much you notice not just the music, but also like some of the soundscaping as well, and how that adds to like the drama and the gravity of the scene. And I love a good silence. There's so much you can say with silence, or a lack of speaking and a lack of music.
Yeah.
And I loved how that the silences and the rain when Arthur comes to the realization. Yeah, it was just so poetic.
Yeah, I agree. So I think next we have a new submitter. So this one's from Myth.
Hello, I'm Myth, or Mythology Addict, he, him, and my personal thoughts on the 255th chapter is, I both enjoyed it a lot and found it very interesting, but also found it very confusing, because the whole thing with the map I just found to be rather bizarre. Because if you're gonna move constantly, then eventually it's gonna get found by someone who may be a cult member. I mean, yes, it was relatively unsafe at the castle, but it was still, protected by magic, by the prince guy who was about to stab Arthur, and the dark young that Arthur killed with a gun, and all that. Also, Lilith's very visceral reaction to being called the daughter of Cain instead of the daughter of Nyarlathotep is something that I find wonderful. Absolutely fucking wonderful. So, yeah, I haven't done a recording before, so I don't know if this is the way they usually work, but yeah, wonderful episode, that I have to say.
Thank you so much, Myth. You did a great first recording. Really appreciate you submitting. And I actually really like that you mentioned you didn't fully understand why they're constantly going to be moving it, because that was me too at first. And the concept of constantly keeping the stone moving, eventually they're going to be found. So, right. At least if it was in the castle that had some protections, it would be better than just like walking around with it. But I do think ultimately it was never about keeping the Blackstone safe. I think at some point Alia probably realized that it was inevitable, that there was no future where he did not get the stone. And so the point was more to teach Arthur than it was to protect the stone. I don't think their mission actually was ever about the stone. I think it was the conceit of protecting it to teach Arthur a lesson, which is why I can kind of understand why they would just say, okay, we need to be moving around. Because how much is Arthur going to learn in a castle, right? And how do you force him to have these experiences, and how do you get him to understand the gravity of the situation they're up against without a journey of some kind to teach him these things? And I think too, it was probably important to, what my suspicion is, this goes into theory territory. My suspicion is really that Alia probably knew that there was a point she stopped being able to see the future, or like, I don't want to say see the future that straightforward, but have these predictions or this insight about. And it's like, well, at a certain point, Arthur's going to get the stone, and he's probably going to give it to Cain. And there's not really a lot of options that come out where that doesn't happen or something worse happens. So we just have to accept that Arthur's going to get the stone. And
and just keep away with him
yeah,
for as long as
we just have to
possible.
hope that once he gets it, he understands what we're trying to teach him. So I think that was really more the intention.
Yeah, and Myth's message also made me realize, so the Blackstone's not with us. Was the Blackstone ever actually at Castle Carringford? Or was it all a ruse? Cause like now Lilith is going to is going to try to manipulate Arthur in his dreams to fetch the Blackstone, but she doesn't know where it is. I don't know how any of this is going to work, unless she's going to be like, okay, I guess I'm going to have you sleepwalk back to Castle Carringford and get in the basement and show me the Blackstone. I don't know.
Well, do we know that we don't have, do we know that the Blackstone isn't with us? Because I thought it was still in the chest.
I think that there have been some theories that it's a fake. Like, the map was blank and there's no Blackstone. But that has not been confirmed. So it very well could be that the Blackstone is just in the chest, in the carriage.
See, my theory before this chapter was that the map was blank and there was no stone in the chest. Now I'm kind of thinking there is a stone in the chest, but I'm only thinking that because Lilith is so certain that she's got to get into Arthur and get it. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, if Lilith can't see the stone either, she may just be believing what everybody else is saying and telling her that it's in that chest. Maybe Arthur has already seen that it's not there, or, I doubt it, but I think that it is there because of how because of the seriousness with which Arthur is talking about her getting the stone. I think that it's probably in the chest, but I also can see a time where it isn't. Although I will say, it would kind of suck if it wasn't there, because then we're still looking for the Blackstone. Like, this kind of feels like the end of that task.
Yeah, and I think that it's likely that there's only one more episode, part in this season, and so there's not a lot of time for Arthur to cover a lot of ground. So yeah, I guess it makes sense that the Blackstone would actually be in the chest. Yeah,
and we do have tentative confirmation. Harlan has mentioned that he intended for episode 60 to be the end of Malevolent, with season 6 being the final season. And so it would stand to reason that he thinks that 52 will be the end of season 5, which means we only have one more part to go. That being said, things change all the time. We don't know. That's like a whole year away. So anything could happen. But that being said, like, if this is the end of season 5, I do think the stone's going to have to be in there, or it's going to have to be like a really crazy time jump, or something really intense is going to have to happen at the end of the episode to justify it not being there.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see what the next part brings.
Yeah, I agree. Now we are going to listen to Misraa's message.
Hi, this is Misraa. My pronouns are she, they, and I absolutely cannot get over that stargazing scene at the end of this chapter. I'm reminded of the last time stars were brought up significantly in Malevolent, the story Arthur told Percy of the man alone in the woods. The stars are described as distant and impersonal, used to highlight his insignificance in the cosmic view of things, until the woman arrives and starts a fire which dims the view of the stars above. And yet here, as John sees the stars and describes them, he calls them young, bright, and shining down on them, a more personal connection to these stars. The fire is gone now, but there is a new appreciation for those stars and the light they give. And I can't help but make a connection to how fire is used to represent Faroe, her warmth and light guiding Arthur. And as Arthur says in this chapter, after Lilith destroys their fire, sometimes the things that were in our life for far too little time make the biggest impacts. That fire is gone, but that allows the starlight back. And it's John who notices and gives those stars back to Arthur, just as he's helped Arthur to find hope and a reason to continue moving forward. At the end, Arthur says he'll enjoy the starlight despite not being able to see them himself, but he knows they're there because of John, who's allowed him to see the stars again and appreciate their beauty. All the small little lights in the world that still matter.
Thank you so much, Misraa. You are such a gift and a treasure. You are a star. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Fall, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, this was such a nice message, and Seer says, when we were listening to this, Seer said that it was really cool how everybody was picking sort of different aspects or different features of the episode to talk about, and that was not on purpose. That was not planned. And so it's really cool to see everyone's like takeaway. And man, I thought that Arthur's final line, you know, thank you, Lilith. Couldn't see the forest for the trees with the fire here. You do what you have to do. I'll enjoy the starlight. I was like, that's a banger. That's a baller-ass thing to say. Just be like, fuck you, and yeah, I'm going to enjoy the starlight. I love that so much. But I also didn't connect it back to the story that Arthur told Percival. That is really interesting, especially because it has similar fireside imagery and talk about like meaning and purpose and, you know, how small and insignificant you can feel while looking at the stars, you know, and being alone in nature. And that is very relevant here too.
Yeah, and I also did not make that connection to the story that Arthur tells. So I loved that. That was a very valuable piece of insight. Very much appreciate it. I also want to mention that you do what you have to do is so specific. It is not, it feels like when, it reminds me of when somebody in power is getting their way because they have the power to get their way, but you are pretty sure that this isn't what they want to be doing either. Like, this, it was very much a moment of, okay, buddy, you do what you have to do. And I'm hoping that kind of reminder that you have the day you deserve is going to resonate with Lilith. Maybe it won't be that impactful, but I can hope that, you know, maybe Lilith will be like, I don't have to do this. You know, like maybe Lilith will have a change of heart.
And like realize like, yeah, exactly. Have a change of heart, or like realize that she doesn't have to like fulfill this role or this task or compulsion or whatever it is.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing I want to mention is the first thing that John mentioning the stars kicked off for me was this connection that stars are dead when we see them. Stars have died a long, long time ago, and we are seeing the remnants of them. And John seeing the stars that are really just echoes of the lives those stars lived, for better like phrasing, I can't think of a less corny way to say it, was really touching for me, because it just reminded me of what a lasting impact people can have even so long after they're gone, and what your impact could make for somebody, and you will have no idea that you ever had any impression on anybody. I mean, there are complete strangers that still remember what a beautiful smile you had. And I know that sounds so hard to believe and so corny and really disconnected sometimes, but it's the truth. And for John to look up and to know that, like, to see these beautiful memories of something that humans have been using to navigate the world, and it's kind of, the sky is something that unites everybody. We are all living under the same sky, and for me it was very much a beautiful moment where John got to appreciate the longevity of human existence in their memories versus their extremely short lifespans, and how much we try and do with the time that we have. And I loved that they got to go out in this episode looking up at the stars together. And I love that even though Arthur can't see them, he remembers what they look like. And I don't think they've changed very much from they could be the exact same fucking star. So
Yeah, it's a moment where you can feel the vastness of the universe when you look at the stars. You can feel small and insignificant and just like a speck of a blip of an existence. But like you were saying, the stars are also something that we all share all over the world, and they are something that is so meaningful to our sort of place in the universe. Not just making us feel the vastness of it, but to know the map of like where we are in the universe.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that hopefully, if you are listening to this in the future, we are echoing some of the wonderful times that we've had, because the Patreon experience is truly like nothing else. And I hope that you can feel like you're there when you listen to this, because it was a great time. We have one more voice message, a very special one, and it does come with some musical accompaniment. So this one is from Graham.
Hello, my name is Graham, and my pronouns are he, him. And I don't really have anything specific to say in this message. I don't have anything poignant or thoughtful or impactful. I just wanted to say that this chapter really resonated with me, and it released at a time that was kind of rough for me. I'm still in a kind of rough point right now, and I'm still processing what this message means to me, but I appreciate it, and I too believe that it's worth trying even if you don't succeed. And it resonated with me so much I wrote song lyrics, and then someone else in the Patreon channels resonated with my song lyrics so much that he made music for it, shine.exe, and the song is not done yet, but it is called Raison d'être, reason for being. Yeah, I love you guys. That's all.
And Graham has sent me a website that automatically plays music that has been composed. So this is kind of a rough draft of what the song will hopefully sound like. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Graham. And thank you so much to shine.exe for the loving music.
Yeah, that was really amazing. I love how much art Malevolent inspires in people and really makes them feel. And Graham, thank you for sending that voice message as well. I know that you felt like you didn't have much to say, but your voice message in its entirety, I felt like encapsulated so many people's reaction to this episode, because it sort of smacked all of us in the face with how much hope there was to be had, and that message of hope in this really difficult time in the world. And so I really liked how honest your voice message was.
Yeah, me too. And with that, my friends, on this extra special, extra long episode of Autopsy, I will free you all into the void to scream.
Yeah, go have a good scream for Arthur Lester.
Yeah, the way I appreciate you guys cannot be understated. The peak of our episode tonight, we had like 18 people on the 40th episode. Thank you so much to everybody for coming, and thank you, Vol, for hanging out with me. And just by the way, side note, I love you.
Aw, you're so sweet. I love you too, Queen.
Bye, everybody.
I'm gonna go enjoy the starlight. Good night.
Thank you, of course, to Harlan Guthrie, the sole creator of Malevolent. You can find everything official at linktree/Harlan Guthrie. Without his labor of love for a story he wants to tell, we wouldn't be here. And speaking of here, if you want to be part of the live vote chat I record each week, join the Invictus Patreon and connect your Discord account. We have our own private patrons-only autopsy channel. If you want to chat with me and maybe even some other folks you hear from on the show, you can also find a public autopsy channel from the Invictus Discord, so you can hang out even if you're not a patron. While Malevolent Autopsy is my pride and joy, it wouldn't be ever improving without some key players. Thank you to Misraa, Nikki, and Vol Control for their work editing and assisting with production. They do so much for the show, and they do it all as volunteers, and I couldn't be more grateful. To submit a voice recording, have your message read aloud on the show, or find us on other platforms, visit linktree/Malevolent Autopsy. Let's hear from one more Malevolent fan before we finish this week.
Hi there, my name is Haley, she, her, and Malevolent has made such a positive impact in my life. I started listening to it during a rough time a few years ago, and it has brought me the gift of support and community. I loved voting week to week as part of the Patreon and found new friends surrounding this podcast. It was a wonderful experience to suddenly find this lost surge of creativity. I haven't felt like that in years. I was constantly creating art again. Not only that, I met the love of my life through it, and in April, we'll have been dating for 2 years. Life is full of horrors, but it is also full of hope and love. I've met so many wonderful lifelong friends through this community, and I hope to make many more. Malevolent has been a constant source of inspiration and joy that I can't imagine my life without.
I'm your host, Queen, and I'll see you next week. The horrors persist, but so do we.